Welcome to the Hindu Daily. Okay, let's dive right in. India is looking at a pretty major economic shift with GST 2.0 set to kick off from September 22, 2025. The article we're looking at calls it short-term pain, possible long-term gain. Now, when GST first came in, the idea was, big picture, boost the economy, make things more efficient for consumption, production.
Right.
It was meant to be a destination-based tax, burden on the final consumer. Businesses get input tax credits. But, well, the reality had some bumps, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That pain part was very real. The original GST, the goals were laudable, but the execution, it got complicated. Yeah, the compensation cess, multiple tax rates that felt a little bit confusing at times. And critically, these inverted duty structures.
Ah, yes. Explain that a bit.
Basically, when the tax on your raw materials ends up being higher than the tax on your finished goods, it's counterintuitive. It actually hurts domestic manufacturing.
Right.
Add high compliance costs on top of that. And yeah, the initial rollout was definitely challenging for
Sure.
many businesses.
Makes total sense. So fast forward to GST 2.0. What are the big changes we should expect in the rates? The article mentions getting rid of the 12% and 28% rates. That seems significant.
Very significant. They're keeping the 0%, 5%, and 18% tiers, but shuffling quite a lot of goods and services between them. And then there's this new one, a 40% demerit rate. Same goods, luxury items, think tobacco, maybe certain high-end cars, that sort of thing.
Okay. But the headline number seems to be that most things, over 80% of the goods affected, will actually see their rates go down.
Exactly. And look at which goods. Textiles, consumer electronics, cars, health services, a lot of food items.
These aren't small sectors.
Not at all. They're very employment heavy. So lower prices there could mean, wider benefits, potentially easing household budgets quite a bit. And it's not just the consumer side. Think production fertilizers, farm machinery, renewable energy components, lower input costs for farmers. It's a big deal for the rural economy. It seems designed for broad stimulation.
Right. But here's the part that really jumped out at me. The immediate financial hit. Lower tax rates, even if they boost demand eventually, are projected to cause GST revenues to fall initially. The Finance Ministry's estimate is, 48,000 crore revenue loss for a full year? That's substantial.
It is a substantial number, no doubt. But this is the core of that long-term gain idea. It hinges on the income augmenting effect.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, the revenue the government doesn't collect.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't just disappear into thin air, right? It stays with taxpayers. It increases disposable income, especially for people buying necessities, often found in that 5% bracket.
So more money in people's pockets.
Exactly. And the bet is, with that extra cash, people will spend more, including on items in the higher tax brackets, the 18% and the new 40%. Comforts, maybe some luxuries. Over time, this increased spending is expected to generate more revenue, sort of making up for that initial shortfall. It's a strategic gamble, you could say, prioritizing consumer spending now for gains later.
But the loss is immediate, the gain is hoped for.
Precisely. The timing is key.
Which brings us to the wider picture. What does this immediate revenue drop mean for the government's budget, say, for 2025-26? Especially if, as the article notes, Q1 GDP growth was already a bit sluggish and direct taxes weren't exactly booming?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. The government has a couple of main options. Neither is ideal. They could cut back on their own spending.
Which could slow down the economy.
Exactly. Or they could just accept a higher fiscal deficit.
Which has its own risks, investor confidence, borrowing costs.
Right. The article also touches on using monetary policy, like cutting the repo rate, maybe injecting more liquidity, but that carries a real risk of stoking inflation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There are limits to how much you can push that lever.
So summing up this first piece, what's the big takeaway for India's long-term growth prospects?
Well, stimulating demand like this can give a boost, definitely. But it's more of an occasional tool. The article rightly points out that sustainable long-run growth really depends more on fundamentals like saving and investment rates.
Yeah.
You can't just cut taxes indefinitely.
Okay, shifting gears now. From the economy to the legal system, we're looking at a recent Supreme Court decision. It's the Shivangi Bansal versus Sahib Bansal case from July 22, 2025. The court basically endorsed guidelines from an earlier Allahabad High Court case.
Mukesh Bansal case, yeah.
And these guidelines concern Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code, the anti-cruelty law in marriage. The key things are a 2-month cooling period before police can take coercive action after complaint, and referring the case to something called a Family Welfare Committee, or FWC.
And the author of this article comes out swinging, basically. They argue this ruling seriously undermines a victim's right to get justice quickly.
Hmm.
And importantly, it interferes with how criminal justice agencies are supposed to operate autonomously. It adds this extra layer, this delay.
Okay, let's back up a bit. Section 498 itself, it was put in place to tackle cruelty against women within marriage, right? But there have always been concerns about misuse.
There have. And because of those concerns, safeguards were already put in place over the years. You had landmark judgments like Arnesh Kumar that laid down really strict rules against arbitrary arrests. The idea was to protect the accused's liberty without blocking a genuine victim's access to help.
Weren't there also rules about preliminary inquiries in some cases? Like in the Lalita Kumari guidelines and recent criminal law changes.
Exactly. The system wasn't static. It already had checks and balances with preliminary inquiries, rationalized arrest powers in the Criminal Procedure Code from 2008, other judgments like Sadinder Kumar and Till. There were mechanisms to prevent misuse.
And did those mechanisms work?
Well, look at the data. The NCRB, that's the National Crime Records Bureau, their figures show arrests under 498A actually went down between 2015 and 2022, from over 187,000 to about 145,000.
Even though more cases were being registered.
Precisely. That's the fascinating part. It suggests the existing safeguards were working. They were protecting the rights of the accused without stopping victims from filing complaints and seeking justice. The system was finding a balance.
Now, this whole idea of cooling periods and family welfare committees,
Yeah.
it sounds familiar. Hasn't the court tried something like this before?
It has. Good memory. Back in 2017, in the Rajesh Sharma case, the Supreme Court did issue very similar directions. FWCs, a one-month cooling period then.
But what happened?
It didn't last long. Within about a year, in another case, Social Action Forum for Manav Adhikar, the court overturned those directions, called them regressive, and basically said setting up these committees was beyond what the judiciary should be doing. It was stepping into legislative territory.
So this raises a pretty important question then.
Right. Given that history, and given that the existing legal framework seemed to be balancing things reasonably well, why bring back this cooling period as these FWCs now? The article argues it's problematic because, well, it's not really based on any existing law. It just delays things for the victim who might need urgent help, and it interferes with the police and prosecutors doing their jobs. It's like adding an unnecessary non-legal hurdle.
Okay, let's move to our third piece. September 17th is World Patient Safety Day. A good moment to talk about this. The global stats are pretty sobering, aren't they? 1 in 10 patients harmed during hospital stays.
Yeah, and it's even higher, 4 in 10 in outpatient care. It's a massive, often hidden problem worldwide.
And India faces some specific challenges here.
Definitely. We're seeing a major shift towards chronic diseases, cancer, diabetes, heart conditions, mental health issues. Now, if you connect this to the bigger picture, these conditions often require long-term, frequent interactions with the healthcare system, more appointments, more tests, more medications.
Which means more opportunities for something to go wrong.
Exactly. More chances for safety lapses, medication mix-ups, delayed follow-ups, miscommunication between specialists, and complex acute care also needs really tight coordination, which can sometimes fall short.
We often think of patient harm as, major surgical errors or infections, but the article points out more common, everyday things too.
Absolutely. Things that might seem small, but can have big consequences, like unintentionally prescribing drugs that interact badly, or delays in diagnosing something treatable, even preventable falls in hospitals or clinics. These happen all the time and often go under the radar.
The article mentions a two-way gap in India. What does that mean?
It's about both sides of the interaction. On one side, you have healthcare providers who are often incredibly overburdened. Staff shortages, high patient numbers, long shifts. It leads to burnout and increases the risk of errors.
And the other side.
Patients who might be passive or feel intimidated. Maybe they're hesitant to ask questions, or they don't feel empowered to speak up if something doesn't seem right.
So closing that gap means empowering patients.
Yes, making them active partners in their care. And systems need to encourage and facilitate that partnership. It's a culture shift.
Has India taken steps already? I know there was a national patient safety framework.
Yes. The National Patient Safety Implementation Framework ran from 2018 to 2025. There are organizations like the Society of Pharmacovigilance, India, tracking drug reactions, and NABH, the National Accreditation Board for Hospitals, sets quality and safety standards.
But how widespread is that accreditation?
That's the catch. What's fascinating, or perhaps concerning, is that less than 5% of Indian hospitals actually have full NABH accreditation. So there's a long way to go in terms of meeting those benchmarks across the board.
Are others involved? Civil society.
Definitely. Groups like the Patient Safety and Access Initiative of India Foundation, pushing for things like better medical device safety, and the Patients for Patient Safety Foundation, doing great work raising awareness directly with communities. They're vital.
So, putting it all together, what's needed to build a real culture of safety? The article suggests patient advisory councils.
Yeah, that's an idea borrowed from high-income countries that's shown promise. PPs bring patient perspectives directly into how hospitals run things, how safety protocols are designed and implemented, making sure the patient voice is heard at the decision-making table.
So, it's about integrating efforts.
Exactly. As India's current safety framework period ends, the call is for everyone to step up. Government needs renewed focus and resources, especially embedding safety into medical training early on. Hospitals need to strive for those accreditation standards and embrace things like peace. And really, all stakeholders need to work together so safe care isn't just an aspiration, but an everyday reality, especially as this year's theme highlights, for newborns and children.
All right, on to science now, and this sounds really cool. Researchers at the University of Tasmania, they've tackled a common lab technique, ion chromatography.
That's right, it's used to separate and measure ions in a sample. Think pollutants in water, nutrients in soil.
And normally this needs big, expensive lab gear, right?
Usually, yes.
Yeah.
Very sophisticated, very costly equipment confined to a dedicated lab.
But they've come up with something different.
They have a simpler, portable method, something you can actually take out into the field, and crucially, something that's affordable and practical enough for science classrooms. It's called aquamonitrix.
Portable ion chromatography. Aquamonitrix. How does it work? Did students actually use it?
They did. Second-year undergrads used it to test soil water right after collecting it. They were looking for nitrate and nitrite ions that can be harmful environmental pollutants if levels get too high.
And the results?
They compared them directly with a standard, expensive lab machine. And guess what? The portable device gave comparable, accurate results right there in the field. It's a real game changer for immediate analysis.
One of the researchers, Dr. Brett Paul, talks about taking our chemistry out of the laboratory into the field. Why is that so important?
Well, it bridges that gap between textbook theory and real-world application. Students see that analytical chemistry isn't just fiddling with test tubes in a sterile lab. It connects directly to environmental monitoring, to solving actual problems. It also aligns perfectly with modern chemistry education guidelines that stressed hands-on, real-world learning. Makes it much more engaging.
So how does this portable device actually work? The article mentions simplicity to its benefit.
Yeah, it's a low-pressure system. It pushes the sample through a short column where the different anions, the negatively charged ions like nitrate and nitrite, get separated based on how they interact with the column material. And the liquid used to push the sample through the aluminum, it's just sodium chloride solution, basically salt water. Very cheap, very environmentally friendly.
Clever. How does it specifically detect nitrate and nitrite without getting confused by other stuff in the soil water?
It uses a simple, low-cost UV light detector. Both nitrate and nitrite absorb UV light in specific wavelengths. So as they pass through the detector after being separated on the column, you get two distinct peaks on a graph, a chromatogram.
Ah, so you see peak 1, that's nitrite, peak 2, that's nitrate.
Exactly. And the size of the peak tells you the concentration. It's quite specific, so you get a nice clean signal without much interference from other common anions.
So comparing this aquamonitrix to the big lab machine,
Yeah.
what's the key difference?
Cost is a huge one. Maybe $10,000 for the portable unit versus $100,000 or more for the lab benchtop version.
Wow.
And complexity. The lab machine is designed to do, dozens of different analyses very precisely. It needs expert operators. The portable one, as Dr. Paul puts it, is designed to do one or two things very well. It's rugged, battery-powered, and importantly, students with minimal training can use it effectively. It's about fit-for-purpose technology.
Makes sense. Are they developing this for other things besides nitrate and nitrite?
Yes, absolutely. They're working on a similar portable device to measure ammonia. That would let them look at the whole nitrogen cycle, really important for water treatment, agriculture, environmental studies.
And arsenic, I saw that mentioned.
Yes, an arsenic detector is also in the works. That's a massive public health issue in many parts of the world, including India and Bangladesh, because of contaminated groundwater. A low-cost, field-deployable arsenic test would be incredibly valuable.
So from an educational angle, what's the real payoff here?
It's that complete learning loop. Students get the theory, then they immediately apply it with a practical, hands-on device to analyze a real sample and interpret the data. It fosters genuine curiosity and interest in analytical chemistry. And like one of the other researchers mentioned, you could even use these devices for longer-term monitoring projects, maybe students tracking local water quality over time. It goes beyond a single lab session.
It really does sound empowering, putting that kind of analytical capability into the hands of students, maybe even citizen scientists. It lets people engage directly with the science happening in their own environment. Okay, our next topic takes us to the United States, and it starts with some very disturbing news. The fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk, the right-wing activist and Trump ally, on September 11th. Observers are saying this event highlights that the potential for political violence in the U.S. is reaching very dangerous levels. What's feeding this?
It seems to be a grim combination of factors. Deepening ideological splits, significant demographic changes causing anxieties, the echo chambers and outrage machines of social media, and yes, the polarizing figure of Donald Trump himself.
And this isn't just rhetoric, right? There have been actual acts of violence targeting political figures. Sadly, yes. And across the spectrum. The article lists several examples targeting Democrats. A state leader was killed, a governor's home was subject to arson, the Speaker of the House's husband was seriously injured in an attack, a plot to kidnap a governor was foiled, and Republicans have been targeted too. 2 assassination attempts against Mr. Trump, the House Majority Whip being shot back in 2017. What's chilling is how widespread it feels, affecting both sides.
Let's try to unpack some of those underlying causes. The article mentions income inequality.
Yes, the U.S. has a very high income inequality compared to other developed nations, and it's been getting worse for decades. That can breed resentment and instability.
And the demographic shifts.
Also significant, the white population share has dropped quite dramatically, from 80% in 1980 down to 58% in 2020. Meanwhile, Hispanic and Asian populations have grown substantially. These shifts can create cultural friction and political realignment, sometimes fueling anxieties exploited by certain political movements.
Has this changed how people identify politically? Definitely. Data from a Pew survey back in 2014, even before Trump's presidency, showed the political center shrinking rapidly. Fewer people holding a mix of liberal and conservative views. At the same time, Republicans moved further right, Democrats further left. And the animosity grew. The percentage of people holding very unfavorable views of the other party more than doubled between 1994 and 2014.
Are there specific issues where these divides are really stark?
Plenty. The article gives examples like views on diversity. 76% of liberals see it as positive versus only 20% of conservatives. Or where people prefer to live, conservatives more likely to want to live among co-religionists. Interestingly, the data suggests right-wing individuals tend to be more ideologically siloed, having more close friends who share their political views compared to liberals.
And gun control seems like a classic example of this divide.
A perfect and tragic illustration. The 2024 Pew data. 85% of Democrats want an assault weapons ban, 57% of Republicans oppose it, 74% of Republicans support arming teachers, only 27% of Democrats agree. The gap is enormous.
How has social media played into all this?
It's acted like an accelerant. It's been particularly effective for amplifying right-wing populist messages and weaponizing polarization. Scholars talk about the rise of outrage as a political commodity online. Research also shows how a small fraction of users on platforms like X, formerly Twitter, can disproportionately amplify extreme views, creating a skewed perception of public opinion for many people.
What about Donald Trump's specific role in all this?
The article positions him as someone who tapped into and amplified existing anxieties, particularly white Christian nationalism, and pulled the Republican Party significantly further to the right. It even cites the V-Dem Index, a respected measure of democracy, which recorded a noticeable decline in American democracy during his first term, down to levels last seen in the 1970s.
And there are concerns about a potential second term.
Yes, experts quoted worry about it potentially taking on authoritarian characteristics, things like consolidating executive power, undermining independent institutions, targeting opponents, or the press.
How did Mr. Trump respond to the Charlie Kirk shooting?
His reaction was telling. He immediately blamed the radical left, without any evidence being presented publicly at that time. He highlighted attacks against Republicans, including himself, but notably didn't mention violence against Democrats or the January 6th Capitol riot by his own supporters, many of whom he's since pardoned. It reinforces that partisan framing.
But it's crucial not to paint this as purely one-sided violence.
Absolutely not. The article cites data from the Center for Strategic and International Studies covering decades, from 1994 to 2020. It found significantly more fatalities resulted from right-wing extremist violence compared to left-wing or anti-fascist violence during that period. It's a complex picture, but the data points to a particular prevalence on the right.
The article also brings in historical context, saying this isn't entirely new for America.
Right. It argues that while liberalism is a strong current in American history, so is illiberalism. The nation's founding involved violence and dispossession, and there's a long history of white supremacy, racism, and vigilante action. Think figures like George Wallace in the segregation era. These undercurrents haven't vanished.
And they manifest today in things like incarceration rates.
Starkly,
Yep.
the U.S. incarcerates people at a much higher rate than most European countries, and black Americans are imprisoned at vastly disproportionate rates compared to white Americans. That points to deep, persistent systemic inequalities.
And of course, gun violence itself.
The numbers are staggering. U.S. gun death rates dwarf those in other high-income countries. Hundreds of mass shootings every year. The article notes the grim irony that Charlie Kirk himself was a staunch defender of gun rights, viewing gun deaths as a necessary price for freedom.
So the takeaway here is that the current political volatility in America isn't just a surface-level issue.
It's not at all. It's presented as a deeply rooted crisis, woven from historical threads, demographic shifts, economic anxieties, ideological hardening, and amplified by modern technology and political figures. It's multifaceted and deeply concerning.
Finally, let's turn to the world of artificial intelligence. We hear so much about the automated economy, AI's efficiency, its accuracy. But this article asks us to look behind the curtain. Who is actually doing the work that makes AI seem so smart? It points to an invisible labor force.
Yeah, the so-called ghost workers, often low-paid individuals, predominantly in developing countries, doing the essential groundwork that powers AI.
What kind of work are we talking about?
A huge part of it is data annotation. These workers meticulously label raw data images, audio clips, text snippets, video frames. Think about it. How does an AI learn what yellow is? Humans have to show it countless examples labeled yellow. How does a self-driving car learn to tell a stop sign from a pedestrian? Humans have labeled thousands, millions of images.
So better AI means more human labeling.
Generally, yes. Higher quality, more nuanced AI often requires vast amounts of carefully labeled training data, which means more human hours.
And this is especially true for the big large language models like ChatGPT.
Absolutely. Training those involves multiple steps. While the initial phase might be more automated, humans are critical for the later stages. They fine-tune the AI's responses, giving feedback to make it more accurate, helpful, and safer. They're also the ones who try to find and fix errors or potential jailbreaks, ways to trick the AI into generating harmful content.
And where is this work actually done?
A lot of it is outsourced by major tech companies, often based in Silicon Valley, to countries like Kenya, India, Pakistan, China, the Philippines.
Right there.
Primarily because they can pay much lower wages and operate with fewer regulations compared to their home countries. The article highlights concerns about long hours and low pay. It also raises a really serious issue. Sometimes non-experts are hired to label highly technical data, like medical scans. If they make mistakes due to lack of expertise, those errors get baked into the AI, which could have dangerous real-world consequences.
It's not just data labeling either, is it? Even things we think are fully automated.
Right, like content moderation on social media. We imagine algorithms are doing all the filtering, but behind the scenes, there are armies of human moderators viewing often incredibly disturbing content, violence, hate speech, abuse, day in, day out.
That must take a huge mental toll.
Immense. The article mentions high rates of PTSD, anxiety, and depression among these workers. It goes beyond that voice actors, performers, even children are sometimes recorded to train AI on human sounds and movements, often with little transparency or compensation for how their digital likenesses might be used.
Is there a concrete example of these conditions?
The article cites a powerful letter from Kenyan AI workers to former U.S. President Biden in 2024. They described their work annotating graphic content for less than $2 an hour, often for more than 8 hours a day, as modern-day slavery.
Less than $2 an hour.
And they reported facing termination or having unionizing efforts shut down if they tried to raise concerns about pay or conditions.
How is this work typically structured? Is it like a regular job?
Often not. It's very fragmented gig work. Workers might be hired through intermediary platforms, sometimes without even knowing which major tech company they're ultimately working for. They're paid per tiny microtask, constantly monitored for productivity, and can be dropped instantly if they don't meet targets. It's incredibly precarious.
So what's the bottom line here? What does this mean for AI development?
It means these ghost workers are absolutely essential to the AI revolution we're experiencing. But because they're largely invisible and their work is often informal, they lack recognition and protection, allowing exploitation to continue.
Which raises a big ethical question.
It's a huge one. The article argues strongly for the need for much stricter laws and regulations, not just about AI's output or potential biases, but about the entire labor supply chain behind it, ensuring transparency, fair wages, decent working conditions, and basic dignity for the people doing this crucial work.
It really makes you think about the hidden human cost behind the AI tools and services we use every day. As these technologies become more integrated into our lives, maybe we need to ask more questions about how they're made and by whom. What kind of automated future are we actually building if it rests on exploitation? Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.